You are live.
You
Oh my gosh, that is great. I really did. I'm sorry. I honestly I thought that I'm a moron. I'm the first one to raise my hand and say I am a moron because I'm looking at the screen. I'm like, I don't see that little red bar. I don't see any people like watching. And then I look up in the right or left hand corner, however you look at the stupid screen. I'm like, the button doesn't say it's. So anyway, welcome back. We get to do a redo. This is Data Security Over Coffee for 2024, another fun-filled season with Joe and Angie being absolute morons on the internet, which is, it's almost as bad as people that take pictures of their cats and what they're eating and they post it on Facebook because, people really want to know what you're eating and what your cat's doing. But in all seriousness, we were going to have a guest today, and at the 11th hour, he reached out to us and said, hey, I'm sick. I got a stomach bug. Okay. And so I went down to Angie's office and I'm like, what happens to, Merv Griffin, if you remember Merv Griffin or Johnny Carson or John Daly, when their guests don't show up, especially for data security over coffee, because it's such a very important topic, cyber insurance.
Who's John Daly, by the way? He was a golfer. Like,
what? Who's the guy that is coming back from?
Jon Stewart on the Daily Show.
Jon Stewart. Yeah, you're right. John Daly is a golfer. He was I don't know if he's a recovering alcoholic, but
way to mash all that up there, dude.
Yeah. Jon Stewart. Jon Stewart, if you're out there watching Data Security Over Coffee, which I'm sure you are because you want to get tips from Angie and I. Sorry, dude. Anyway, so we decided, hey, listen, we got to figure out this whole Plan B, also known as a contingency plan. But we also wanted to start off with something that was a little bit personal. Bottom line, Angie is still 55 pounds down. She looks great. She's doing really well. She's going to outlive me. I've picked up her 55 pounds. My blood pressure's through the roof. My cholesterol's good. I've got great skin, and my hearing is perfect, so I'm going to look good in a casket. But no, the reality is the importance of health, and we've talked about this before, especially for people that are business owners. And it doesn't mean that employees don't have to worry about their health, because they do. But I think that for those of us that do, in fact, own a business, there is just a different type and level of stress. And we encourage you to go to a program like Johns Hopkins. It's an executive health retreat, and really do a deep dive and figure out what's going on with yourself and do your best to work on those things. But I know that Angie wants to share something that's more personal, that's a lot more fun than me going to a mortuary. So what would you like to share, Angie?
Well, I want to tell Matt Bonchak that I hope he has a speedy recovery. There's a lot of stuff going around this year. It's nasty. But I had a great time over at your house this weekend with you and your wife, Karen, and your in-laws and some cousins, and got to help butcher a cow. So it was a fun time. And the dinner was delicious. And I loved it because it was so much like when I was growing up on my grandpap and grandma's farm. And once a year we would butcher. And then once all the work was done, we all sat down and had a big steak dinner. And so it was just nice to do that because, at our age now, families scattered all over the place and that kind of stuff, doesn't happen a whole lot. And it was a really nice time. And I appreciate you inviting us.
Sure. Well, I think the nicest thing was when John, who is the better half of Angie and John's coupleness,
my amazing fiance.
And my dog is in the background of Lacey's office. When he steps in and says, hey, I'll cook the cheesesteak dinners. Like, now you know that you're in a cool environment when you can come over to somebody's house and just jump in and not just simply be a guest and expect to be waited on. So I think that's kind of cool.
Well, and he's the real deal, man. Did you see him there cooking? He had the cheese under the steam, the lid, and melting the cheese, and he knows his stuff around the kitchen, man. He's 1,000 times better than me in the kitchen.
I can't attest to that because I don't ever recall you cooking for me, but I can say that if you ever break up with John, I'll be happy to date him. So that works for me.
You're not the first person
with
in my
all of
life
that said,
that if
because we're
I
on a
end up
PG
getting
channel.
rid of John, they're getting rid of me. They're keeping John and getting rid of me.
Yeah, it would be difficult because we're kind of, brothers and sisters at work, so it would be a little difficult. But anyway, so contingency plan B, we want to talk about cyber insurance in 2024. I guess the first thing is, so as a practitioner, as a subject matter expert for Reclamere, and for now having spent at Reclamere 23 years in the trenches in information security, prior to that working for an IT service provider, and then having an engineering background, so you're kind of old like me, although I'm older than you. What do you think is the most important place to start this year when we talk to people about cyber insurance? Like, what do you think matters?
Well, I think one of the most important things is whether you have cyber insurance already or you're thinking about getting it.
Mm-hmm.
One of the most important things folks need to do is make sure they have a current, up-to-date incident response plan.
Okay. All right. So a current, up-to-date incident response plan. Why do you say that?
Well, first and foremost, it's going to be on the questionnaire that the carrier sends you when they make a determination whether or not they're going to even cover you or what your rates are going to be. But
okay,
the number of incidents affecting smaller and smaller organizations out there, especially in the form of business email compromise, is just absolutely alarming. And so having an incident response plan where it's documented and then you test it and we sit down with you and we walk through scenarios and we throw curveballs at you. Like, as soon as someone says, well, that's Sally's responsibility. And we say, well, Sally just so happens to be on vacation during this event. Sally, leave the room. Now, what are we going to do? Because that's the way that real incidents happen.
Right.
And having folks walk through that and watching the wheels kind of turn in their brains. I think that's super, super important. And walking through that incident response plan and walking through the tabletop really does help organizations think about things at a more practical level, not so much theoretical or even in a best practices way, but thinking about what does it mean in their environment. I think that's probably one of the most important things I would hope that people think about doing, consider doing. And it's always free to pick up the phone and talk to us about, do you even have an incident response plan? What's it look like to get one done? Okay, maybe you have one, but nobody's looked at it for 5 years and it's something somebody just downloaded off the internet. I mean, let's just meet you where you are and start from something.
So you bring up a good point because, last year we had 2 clients that they already had an incident response plan, but it was one of those incident response plans that were, 3 and 4 years old. And, the best part of that engagement was the epiphany they had in going through just a mock run through of what they currently had, realizing that more than half of the people, not roles, but people's names that were on that incident response plan were no longer with the organization. There was no follow-up or follow-through. There was no, lessons learned section. There was no way for them to really use this thing. And, obviously, as people in the room, we knew how bad that was. But the cool experience for me was for them to say, oh, my gosh, I can't believe that we did this. And now that we've got somebody, a third party in the room watching us have this experience, was a major wake-up call for them.
Yeah, that's really true. I think the other thing that is really been eye-opening with some of these business email compromises lately is that people are relieved when the business email compromise, the attack is not successful in terms of, well, nobody sent any money anywhere, nobody wired any money. Yay, this is great. Well, yeah, except for the fact that many of us are guilty of using our email accounts as basically file storage. And the files that are in those mailboxes, the amount of PII, personally identifiable information, EPHI, electronic patient health information, all of that regulated data sitting in Excel spreadsheets, PDF reports, Word documents, you name it. People are pack rats and they have so much stuff in there. It's scary.
So time out. And let me be that guy who doesn't know what the hell you're talking about. So when you say business email compromise, what do you like make a third grader understand what you're talking about?
Okay. So one day you just start getting complaints from people that you know. Joe, why are you sending me emails? Joe, why are you spamming me? Hey, your company's sending out a bunch of weird emails. And you get to looking into it and find out that Joe Harford's email account was compromised. Attackers were able to get into your email, your work email. And they were able to do that because at some point in time you clicked on something, or at some point in time you logged in from a place that was not so secure. And then once they have access to that mailbox, one of the first things they're going to do is they're going to make a copy of it. So traditional forensics around, hey, what files did they look at? What systems did they go? Like any of the traditional kind of digital forensics is not going to be available. And then what's going to happen is they're going to go through that mailbox. And if you have patient health information in there, you have any kind of regulated information in there, you've got a massive data breach on your hands. And so, yeah, it's great. And we're happy to hear when folks say, yeah, you know, there was an attack, but, you know, nobody went and bought gift cards or nobody wired money anywhere. It's great. And then we have to be the wet blanket that says, but what's in that mailbox?
So
let me I hate that. I hate having to be the person that has to say that.
So let me walk through a couple things. So let's just say, I'm not saying this is, I'm going to use this as an example that maybe you know somebody that uses their corporate email address for everything that they do. Maybe that person uses the same password with that corporate email address for every single site that they log into. And I can attest that that person is not me, because I use one of your favorite tools, beep, 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 that I can't say because that's like an endorsement or whatever, because I know how much you love that tool. So are you saying then that people that use their corporate email address with the same password, or maybe they just change it up by putting a number 1 or a number 2 at the end of it, that can create that exposure for a business email compromise?
It's one of the ways. But the scariest thing is we've spent now the past couple of years telling everybody that if they just turned on multi-factor authentication, you know, where you get the code on your phone or you go to an app and you punch in the code, that you're all good. The problem now is that code creates something called a token, and that token is getting stolen. So now, now they have access to your account even though you have multi-factor authentication turned on. So there are some configurations that when we come in and do a security scan, or we come in and do any kind of assessment with our clients, we're going to scan that environment, that Office 365 environment, and we're going to look at some weird configurations that put people at risk, and come back and say, hey, these are some of the things you need to think about. And they're not things that you have to spend more money to do. They're things that may make security a little more cumbersome in your organization, or your
Right.
end users won't be happy that they got to put their code in more often. But it's way less hassle than an email
Okay.
an email compromise.
So one of the things that we wanted to talk with Matt about today, because by the way, Matt Bonchek is the guy that we buy our insurance from, right?
Yeah.
So he's
yeah.
he's one of our service providers.
Yes.
But I remember when we first started having this conversation and the expense that we were getting ready to dive into. But wasn't there something that you and Matt really wanted to be able to showcase today in regard to, and I'm not going to frame this correctly when I ask the question, so I'm sorry, but something to the effect of whether it was SOC or it was something, we did something as a business that reduced our expenses pertaining to insurance, right? Am I going down the right rabbit hole?
Yes. Two
Okay,
years ago.
So frame the question for me, since I can't.
What is the number one biggest thing that you did at Reclamere to control the cost of your cyber liability insurance?
Boom, you should be on the show all by yourself. Have at it. Do it.
The number one thing that we did was we underwent a SOC 2 audit by a CPA firm. And they basically came in and they reviewed all of our policies, procedures, everything that we do around information technology, security, physical security, you name it, and basically put their seal of approval on it. And that independent third-party validation, attestation, not only did it help us in our costs being lowered, when we went to renew, we actually had a reduction in our cyber insurance premium for this year. And
do you remember? Was it in percentage or dollars that you can remember what that was?
It was percentage, and it was I think it was like in the 15 to 20% reduction rate year over year.
Now, was that so that cost savings, was that cost savings then represented by what we made the investment in SOC, or was it more or less, or do you recall?
It kind of made it a wash.
Okay, and I think that that's important, right? Because I think that a lot of times there is still this fallacy that, oh my gosh, if I'm going to be responsible for information security and I'm going to do this cyber hygiene thing and blah, 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 that I have to spend $1 bazillion. And that's not the case. That's really not the case. I mean, one of the things we went and did last year is, besides trying to determine our target client profile, is we wanted to take a look at the cost of our agreements. And now, obviously, I'm biased when I say this because we own the company together. But you know what? If you take a look at the average spend of one of our healthcare average spend, I'm not talking about the top end and the client, you know who that is. But if you take a look at the average spend, it is dollars compared to what most people would spend on a full-time equivalent. It really is. It's I don't want to say it's a joke, but it's not breaking the bank, is my point. And so it's very similar to, I think, anything else as it pertains to cyber insurance, being able to make sure that, and I think you would agree, not everybody needs to have cyber insurance. Do you agree with that? Or do you, or are you in the camp that everybody should have a cyber insurance policy, period?
No, I don't think there's a one size fits all. And I think that's why it's so important to not only work with somebody like Matt Bonchak at the Hartman Agency on what coverage you're getting and what you need, but it's also important to work with a company like Reclamere that can help you understand where does your data reside and what kind of risk is it posing to you? What kind of regulations are you subject to that are going to make a breach in your situation more costly than maybe someone else? You know, at the end of the day, we all have the ability to make a determination to self-insure. If the number of records within your organization, you know, if you're a small business and the only regulated information you have in your systems happens to be that of your employees, and it's maybe 100 or less, maybe cyber insurance doesn't make sense for you. I don't know. But I don't believe in a one size fits all. I believe in a risk-based approach to everything, from security controls to whether or not to have cyber liability coverage to what should that coverage include. And it's just really important to work with professionals.
Agreed. So we've got, well, we're planning to have a guest every month on Data Security Over Coffee.
Yes.
I think the cool part is that we're going to have a really varied group of people, practitioners, clients. Perhaps we'll throw in an employee here or there.
Vendors.
And obviously, if there are topics, vendors, and obviously, if there are topics that people want to hear about, it's easy enough to email joseph@reclamere.com or Angie@reclamere.com and share those topics with us. But we've got, I think, a really good calendar coming up for 24 when we talk about security risk analysis. You know, we've been talking about that for years. I don't think we'll ever stop talking about it, talking about vulnerability management. But I know that you and Randy, Gene, and Tim are looking at vulnerability management much broader and deeper than we have in the past, and for very good reason, specifically driven by business email compromises and the increase in what that looks like. I'm sure we're going to have conversations that involve AI and machine learning, because those are really cool topics that people want to talk about. But I think that the most important thing that we can do in 24 is make sure that we're relevant and talk about the things that are really driving the efficiency and the safety of people's businesses. And when we start talking about what do you do about a ransomware attack, let's have the conversation proactively on how not to have a ransomware attack in your environment to begin with. You know, when people talk about, oh my gosh, what do I do with my rogue IT director who has all the passwords, and you know, we're not going to be able to get into our environment. Let's have a conversation around policies and procedures prior to that rogue IT director flipping out on a Friday afternoon and holding your business hostage. So I don't know that we're going to have anything that is, you know, 22nd century or earth shattering. I think a lot of it is really good reminders about business practices, regardless of whether you're in healthcare or financial services, or if you're a small or medium-sized business. You know, somebody said to me the other day, and I thought it was kind of funny, they're a small business where I live in Huntington, Pennsylvania. And they said, I'm just a small business. I have a total of 10 employees. I'm not really worried about that cyber stuff. I was like, oh, okay. So do you use computers? Yeah. Do you connect to the internet? Yeah. Do you, do you use computers to transact business and collect money? Yeah. So if your computers all, you know what, stop working and you can't interact with your customers, can you make money? No. Now, maybe that's like a simpleton's example, but at the end of the day, now, does somebody that have 10 computers have to spend $5,000 a month on security? Probably not. But they got to spend something.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they have to do something for the environment and for their employees, et cetera, and their customers, right? So right. I think those are the kind of things. I mean, is there anything that you can think of that you really want to make sure, because we haven't lined up all of the guests for 24, but is there anything that you really want to make sure that we tackle this year?
Wow. You kind of put me on the spot.
I did yesterday because yesterday you were very mean to me, and I now am telling everyone in LinkedIn land that I was in a hostile work environment yesterday. And you know, if Angie ever decides to share the text with you, I think you'll laugh when you hear Siri talk Joe's voice and what I was pressured by yesterday. Oh my
You
gosh.
know, I think what we will continue talking about in 2024 are the fundamentals. Getting the fundamentals right. And one of the most fundamental elements that any organization can do is to start with that risk analysis. It's mandated under so many different industry regulations. It's mandated if you're trying to follow any kind of best practice. And it's really foolish to be spending your money on hardware and software and service providers if you're not spending that money in a way where it's directed to do the most work, have the most impact in the areas of your business that have the highest risk. And
well, you know what? I think it goes back to something you said this last year, and I'll say it again. To me, what you just said is just as important as once a year going through an executive health assessment. So I think that's the fundamental. People have to go through that security risk assessment, cyber hygiene checkup, whatever kind of goofy marketing jazz you want to call it. You need to know the snapshot current state of your cyber posture, period. Okay, that's the reinforced fundamental message, right? I think then the follow on to that in 24 is to then encourage people to take action, to work with a service provider like Reclamere or whomever, but really take that remediation roadmap exercise seriously to say, listen, in manageable chunks, you know that old goofy saying, how to eat an elephant, in manageable chunks over the next 12 months, here are the 2 things or 4 things or whatever that you're going to do over the next 12 months. Do a repeat security risk assessment, gauge where you are at that snapshot in time, and then build your next remediation roadmap. So I think that the fundamental reinforced message is do the stinking thing and then take action with your remediation roadmap exercises. That's what I would say as a follow-on to what you shared.
Yeah. Yeah,
Cool.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Well, I'm also hoping that Angie's going to let me spend some money because we are going to look at a new upgraded StreamYard platform that should be even cooler than what we have today. So stay tuned in February because you never know what's going to happen. Anyway, Angie, thank you for putting up with my nonsense and my craziness. And Matt, again, like Angie said, I really do hope you feel better, buddy. And we'll see you. Oh, actually, did you know? I totally forgot. Do you know that this is leap year?
Yes. As a matter of fact, my father was born.
I'm looking.
My father was
Your dad was born on leap year?
Yes.
What? Really?
Yes. Absolutely. Yes.
I did not know that.
My mother was born on Christmas Day. My father was born on Leap Day.
I didn't know that. Yeah, because I looked at my calendar the other day and I saw February 20th. I'm like, why did I get a misprinted calendar? And then like a dope, I realized, oh my gosh, it's leap year. That's very fascinating to me. So we will celebrate Ryder's birthday. I'm looking. It's a Thursday. Okay. All right, Angie, we're out of here.
Later.
See ya.